We both attended a small Christian college here in Rochester, New York called Roberts Wesleyan College, and I was a senior and was kind of moving on to imagine that I would probably meet my wife once I graduated. And then the last semester of my senior year, via a campus ministry that we were both involved in at Roberts, we started to catch each other's eye. And I had a friend of mine that knew Tamara, and we kind of talked a little bit there and got to know each other a bit. Went out to a local restaurant here in the Rochester area, and as they say, the rest is history.
Yeah, we had a lot of mutual friends. I think that's how we ended up really connecting, because we all hung out with a similar crowd, and so that crowd just mixed, and that's how we really started to spend time together.
That's when you can be very unselfish and you're always thinking of the other person. That was some advice we got before we were married, is that if you can be unselfish and always seek to please the other person, even as Christ talked about, then you're demonstrating true biblical love.
Yeah, I would agree with that, that it's the giving of yourself to think about the other instead of thinking of yourself.
One of the best pieces of advice we got when we were married was a seminar that a guy named Gary Smalley gave. And the title was, Love is a Decision. And his point was, we always romanticize what love is all about. It can be this big emotional thing where you have all these warm feelings inside and you get all excited. But at the end of the day, love is really a decision. It's a choice that you have to make, even when it may not be the most convenient for you or what you want to do. You have to decide to do the right thing in order to love the other person.
And I think that true love is trying to figure out how they feel loved and love them that way. We all have our ways of feeling loved, but when you really care about the other person, trying to speak their love language and love them the way that they feel loved, I think is the best way to love someone. But I agree that love is a decision. It's just a matter of fact. It's not a feeling.
There's many times when it can be hard to love someone because simply by nature we tend to be selfish people. So when people get tired or frustrated, or maybe it's a hard day at work or a hard day at home and you just are feeling stressed, and then one more thing gets added on top of it. Speaking from the guy's perspective, at least that's when I find that it can be most difficult to love, when there's a lot of outside influences that are just weighing you down and putting pressure on you, and now there's one more thing that gets added to that pile. It can be a little challenging. It kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier and the importance of being unselfish and communicating well and deciding to love the person in the way that they want to be loved.
I think when love is difficult, it goes back to that it's a decision. That love is it's a choice you made to love this person, and so it doesn't matter that there are circumstances that make you feel like you don't love them at that time. That is kind of irrelevant. That love is a decision, and you choose to do the right thing and to love them back, or to love in the situation by caring for them or whatever it is that needs to be done, because it was a decision, not because of the way you feel at that moment, because that's so true, that all the outside influences are what make it feel like you could be less than loving at the time.
Well, if you just look at my lovely bride, you can tell she is very beautiful on the outside. And God certainly gifted her in that area, and she does a great job to keep herself looking beautiful, whether it's what she eats or exercise, enough sleep, all those important things. So clearly she's a very beautiful woman on the outside. But what is even more encouraging for me as a husband is how beautiful she is on the inside. And just as she works hard to keep her outside appearance looking wonderful, she works even harder to keep her inside appearance looking wonderful. So she spends time daily with the Lord, reading her Bible in prayer and fellowship with other believers. And she's continually working on her inner character as well, always looking to improve, always looking to get better. She would clearly admit that she's not a perfect wife or a perfect woman, but who is? But she certainly exemplifies many of the characteristics of Proverbs 31, that it talks about a godly wife and a person who is, again, beautiful on the inside and on the outside.
What do I love and treasure about my husband? First, that he's a man of integrity. I am so thankful for him that he chooses the right thing to do, even if something else would be easier. I've seen that time and time again in his walk and in our lives. There was experience in our family's history where another family member, extended family, certainly was not walking in integrity. And that same week, we had talked about the black raspberry bushes that are in the woods off our property, and we had talked about moving them onto our property. And Bryan had said, well, no, they're not our bushes. We absolutely can't move them. That's not our property. And I remember that day when this other event occurred in the extended family that was very sad. I remember starting to cry saying, I am so glad my husband wouldn't move the black raspberry bushes, because it was just the right thing to do. So definitely his integrity, his strong walk with the Lord, just the fact that he has always chosen what God has asked him to do, even when that's not been easy. I, without a shadow of a doubt, know that he puts God first and would always lead our family in that way. So those are the two of the biggest qualities. I also I feel so treasured by him. He goes out of his way to make sure that I know that I'm cared for and that I feel cared for by him. And I do. And so those are definitely some of the top qualities that I love about him.
The Bible has a lot to say about loving another person. Of course, a lot of us are familiar with the passage in 1 Corinthians 13 where it actually gives the definition of love, patient, kind, does not remember past wrongs, which in a marriage, that's pretty important, that you don't remember past wrongs, that you're not bringing up things that your partner did in the past. I'm very thankful that that doesn't happen in our marriage. It also talks a lot about forgiveness as well. And one of the sayings we have, or that we've learned at least the last couple years in our 21 years together, is that if one of us does get impatient and is not loving the other, a lot of times we'll just take our hand and we'll say, here you go, you can have your head back. And they just take it. In fact, that just happened yesterday. I had to do that with my wife. And then I also like in Ephesians 5:2 where it talks about how husbands should love their wives as Christ loved the church, to the point where he was willing to lay down his life for them. And that's something that reminds me as a husband of what I need to do on a continual basis for my wife.
I agree with all of that. The Bible talks about love one another as Christ loved us, so I agree. But just the sacrifices that Christ made of himself, to give of himself, I see that as a way of biblical love, that we give of ourselves, and again, thinking of the other person. I think that's a definition of biblical love. And I also go back to the Corinthians 13, and that there's so much to glean out of that, that just a study of that and lifelong, being able to relate that to your life and your marriage and even your friendships would benefit anyone.